It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Thursday, February 2nd, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that did see our shadow this morning. We've got a few more days of break before the Flyers come back to play.
And I wish my mom, Helene, a happy birthday. Her birthday's
Happy
Groundhog Day.
birthday, Helene. Love to see it. All right, we are going to talk about Travis Konecny on today's show and get to your mailbag questions.
Your Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello there. I am Rachel Donner. You can find me on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here as always with Russ Cohen, who is on Twitter at Sportsology. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. You can follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at Locked On Flyers. That is where you'll keep up to date on all the Flyers news and our episodes. You can also email the show at lockedonflyers@gmail or comment over on YouTube. That is how you get your mailbag questions answered on the show, like we are going to do today. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. It's the official sportsbook of Locked On, so make every moment more. Visit fanduel.com/locked on today to get started. Locked On Flyers is free and available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. So subscribe. You'll get all of our episodes here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Russ, Travis Konecny was the poll winner over on YouTube. In the comments, we put up a poll of what players we wanted to cover this bye week in depth, and was far and away the winner, I would say, of that poll. So we're going to dig into Travis Konecny, who's an interesting question right now. He has got 24 goals, 25 assists for 49 points in 45 games played. He hasn't had any goals since January 11th, though, which is a 9-game streak. He has 3 assists during that span. But he does have 150 shots on goal this season, which is, a step up. And 3 of those goals that he does have are shorthanded goals. First off, what do you see as like the issue right now, I would say, in this little span of not being able to score?
Maybe the mental block of getting to 25. He's never had 25. He's had 24 4 times really. So um, there could be a mental block there, just of getting that milestone for him. Like, hey, I gotten it. That could be it. Uh, I, but I really think it's his play away from the puck has dropped, and I think that's the thing. We had that
Yeah.
game where he was on the ice for every goal against, and so I think it probably has more to do with that. I think when his game is rolling right, then you're going to see him score more. But only thing I'll say about his points is we have to take it with a grain of salt in the sense that Torts even said if this were a playoff team, he would have to have Connected play a little differently. So would that affect his point total? It probably would.
Yeah, I think so too. And yeah, it could be that mental block. I think you're right. Sitting on 24 goals is like definitely, a threshold, right, to get
Yeah.
to 25. And he's certainly been showing in his play that he's been trying to get there. He's just, I think he hit a couple posts. Um, you know, Goalies are there too to stop them.
Yep.
So he just hasn't quite picked the right spot. I would also say, in that time span, his frustration has been showing a little bit more, and I would say his arc in terms of taking penalties this season. Like early, he was taking a bunch and was being, the yappy Travis Konecny,
Yeah.
getting into scrums after it a little bit more, and I think he settled down a little bit, and when he was scoring at a high pace, wasn't taking any penalties at all, like, didn't really get into fights per se. He was still being, scrappy, but not really getting into it. But his penalty minutes, jumped up a little bit in this scoreless span.
Yeah, and honestly, it is at a point where uh, if you were playing meaningful games down the stretch, he would have to cool it because he is at a level where it's almost unacceptable. Because like he had 77 last year, which was his high, and that was high, and he's going to beat that this year.
He definitely, you can say he's improved over last season
Yes.
overall with some caveats, right?
Hmm.
Because, if you looked at um, the right side of takeaways, giveaways, he is on that right side for the first time in a few years. On the positive side there, which is good in terms of his play, partially with his play away from the puck. But as you said, that's not always there depending on how the game goes. He has the highest shot attempts per 60 over his career, at 10 right now. Highest shots on goal per game of his career at 3 over 3. Um, and plus minus, we talk about, it's a stat. It's not something we want to put a ton of weight into, but right now he's a -8, which seems bad, but he was a -23 last season. And so that has been improving a little bit. But
We'd
at
still like
the
to
same
see him on the plus side of that, though, which is
yeah,
that would really be a nice step.
it would, but then you look at his possession quality, it's kind of in the negative, and, if that's really his expected goals for to expected goals against ratio, and that again speaks to his play away from the puck, right?
Yeah.
It's not where it needs to be, and I think he's been focusing way too much on the offensive side of his game and the forechecking, which is something that Tortorella emphasizes, but I think that leads to a lot of missed opportunities on the defensive side, at least when they're at 5 on 5.
Yeah, I mean, he is getting more defensive zone starts this year like he did early in his career, so there is a little bit more confidence from the coach. Uh, his hits are way down though, and that's a
Yep.
little uncharacteristic. So that's something where if the Flyers were truly fighting for a playoff spot down the stretch, you would need him to play a little feistier that way. Uh, Simply just to disrupt the other team or to keep possession of a puck in the offensive zone. That's something that's not fully been there. Otherwise, yeah, look, right now things are looking good. Uh, he probably gets 60 something points this year. Maybe he beats his career high of 61. We'll see.
Right.
And that's honestly that's the high point for Travis Konecny of what you would ever expect him to be anyhow. So then you're just looking for other contributions where so far he has improved on that. On some of them, I would say most of them even. And but again, we would have to see when the team starts getting better, um, what happens with that. But this could be the first year of this new growth, and that's what I would look at it as.
Right, and, you talked about his time on ice. It's over 20 minutes a
Yeah.
game for the first time in his career, and I would say part of that is probably due to the fact that he's been used on the penalty kill for the
Yes.
first time this season, and so that's why his minutes are going up. Now, obviously, he's used on the power play way more, like, in fact, his power play time so far this season, 143 minutes, penalty kill, 94 minutes right now. But we've seen him be a huge part of this new power kill system simply because he is one of those guys that's going to be able to be a part of a breakaway situation if the other team, misses a shot wide. He's got a lot of great chemistry with Scott Lawton on that front, who is, Lawton is better at the defensive side of things, but you have to spring somebody, and Konechny might as well be it, right?
Right. Now, the other question you have to sort of ask yourself is this new version of Travis Konecny, if they were in the playoffs, would he be scoring goals? Because oddly enough, in 22 career playoff games, he only has one goal. So you
I'm
kind of wonder,
thinking
would that?
about who they've played in the playoffs because the options are low, but, I think that the Islanders had a really good defensive system in place. Although Flyers did score goals. I mean, it did
They
go to
did.
7 games.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that it was a different team, right?
No, no, it
With
is, but there's new expectations for him now, and I'm saying that
yes.
he has to do better than that going forward if you wanna retain him on the team, like, he has to.
Yeah, well, that is a good jumping off point because we do have to answer the question, is Travis Konecny a part of the core of this team, for the future? And what do you do with him this season? At the trade deadline, is he somebody you consider? And we are going to do that up next. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. We've got the Super Bowl coming up, and we're really excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On because they're the number one sports book in America, FanDuel. If you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. New customers can join today to get started with $150 in free bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Just sign up at fanduel.com/locked on. They have all your favorite bets from money line to point spreads to player props. You can even combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with the same game parlay. Of course, we do have the Eagles playing in the Super Bowl. So if you want to bet on them in any of the categories, you should do so at FanDuel. They have an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So don't miss out. Place that first $5 bet to get $150 in free bets, win or lose, at fanduel.com/locked on. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So, Russ, we left off with the lingering question: is Travis Konecny essential to the future of the Flyers right now? And I think it's a really good question to ask. And it kind of goes back to the original discussion that we have about this team, that are they in a real rebuild, or are they going to continue to hold on to assets that they can maybe trade for more, but still, you know, play this game like they are playoff contenders? And I think with Travis Konecny, I think that it's a tough question because right now he seems like he is an essential part of this team. But is he an essential part of the team in the future? He doesn't have to be. I don't think. In that, if you look at, having Cutter Gautier on the horizon from last year's draft, and if you get, a quality draft this year and gain more assets and more top picks, you could have a completely different looking team moving in the future that you don't need a Travis Konecny. And, but I go back and forth, right? Because I like what he's done this season. To your point, he could continue on this trend. And especially, we've seen that he is one of the players that has thrived the most under John Tortorella. And Tortorella could want him to stick around and be that example and be that leader moving toward the future. So I could see this going either way, honestly.
No, I could too. I mean, you have to, you know, everybody listening has to divorce yourself from the fact that if you like him and you're glad he's got this year and you don't want to lose him because the Flyers don't have a ton of great players, you got to divorce yourself from that. Um, the first thing I would say that you said was that's accurate is I think where they were going to pick in this draft, by the time Konechny's contract is up, that player could be close to the NHL. So, you're getting that would be like 3 years from now. You're getting close, especially if the level of player is high. You might even, get him a year early. So that might be the timing might be exactly right. So is there a Travis Konechny in this draft at that spot where they'll be picking? Yes, there's definitely a few of them. So like two or three of them I can think of that if they pick in a certain range, definitely. So there's that. You could say Bobby Brink could be the replacement for Travis Konechny, and he definitely could. So when you look at that, you have to look at Travis Konechny and then say, okay, so his contract runs out in 24, 25. He's making 5.5. He's going to want to raise on his next contract. And I get it. Maybe the cap goes up this 10 million that everybody's hoping for, or up to 90, maybe not 10 million, but up to 90, whatever difference that is. And so, yeah, right now, do I think the question you have to ask yourself is, forgetting about if John Tortorella likes him or not. If you don't think you're winning next year, then you can make a great argument for trading Travis Konecny, because you're only going to have him for one more year after that, unless you're locking him up for his entire
Right.
career, which I'm not there yet to do that. And so, like, here, I'll give you an example. Let's say the Kings came calling and said, "Hey, we'll give you Gabe Velarde and a second because we can't sign Gabe. We've got too many good players here." Gabe is, a couple years younger. He's 23. He's an RFA still, so you could sign him to a bridge deal and see how he plays in your organization. It'll be less than 5.5, and you get your second round pick back in this draft. Like, that's something I would have to really seriously consider, because it's not a guarantee that Konechny will be there when they're good. And
Yep.
so those are the kinds of decisions you'd have to make.
Yeah, and I think that for the Flyers in particular, like I said, admitting they're in a rebuild and can make a deal like this is a barrier to making that trade. I just don't know that we have a management that is willing to trade a guy like him when he is one of the only draws the team has right now. That are they going to want to ride out the rest of this season, even with him being, a key part of the marketing and all of that, just because he's been a guy who's scoring a lot. I mean, at least until recently, but he's still like a huge part of the Flyers game. And that's the barrier for me, is management. But I do see the upside to it, like you said. I mean, there's some potentially really good deals to be had out there. With his salary isn't bank breaking in terms
No.
of all the cap problems that some of the top teams have right now. This trade deadline is poised to be a pretty quiet one, but Konechny could be a really good asset to pick up simply because, he doesn't make $9-10 million a
Right.
year, and he's producing, and he's a high energy guy.
And you get a couple of years of term on it. So that's,
Yep,
good for a team that's contending. And so,
exactly.
yeah, that's what you have to look at, because, otherwise, based off this year, and presumably, if he's on this arc, by the time he's up for a contract, you're paying him $8 million at least, right in that range. And so that's what you have to consider, because, again, at that point, and unfortunately, Travis Konecny staying doesn't always rely on Travis Konecny. Can you get rid of Kevin Hayes' contract? If you can't, can you get rid of Risto's contract? If you can't, like, and this is if they've decided to go this direction. If they can't, then that may fall on Konechny as just a casualty.
Yeah, that's a really good point as well. I think that those other guys are, for the Flyers and for their future, are better options to trade than Travis Konechny right
Right.
now. I think that to me, that's no
But the
question, but you may
term is
not be
what
able.
hold right,
Yeah,
what might hold it back.
exactly. And Travis Konechny is in an ideal situation in terms of the term. Like you said, he's in a very successful season right now. And I think, it's trading high versus trading medium
Yeah.
on him, that if he had been traded this past offseason, which we talked about as an option,
Hmm.
but that was going off of the past couple of seasons he had had that maybe weren't as great. And so that would have been a selling medium. This
Right.
is a selling high situation. And, with the Flyers in the position that they're in, that may be what you want to do to build for the future.
Yeah, because, again, they could tell us whatever they want at the end of the year. John Torella can say there's progress, and we're going to be a competitive team next year, and we're going to be harder to play against. But I'm going to say, listen, are you really a playoff bubble team, or are you just further in the mushy middle where, yes, you get more points, you finish the season 8 points out, 10 points out, something like that? And if that's the case, then holding on to all these players doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and I think that the Flyers being, they're still in the mushy middle right now. They're just at the bottom of the mushy
Right.
middle, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But this could have been the year that they were really in the bottom, and they didn't do that because they hired John Tortorella
Right.
and, are getting the most out of a weaker lineup for
Mhm.
sure. Um, and I think that eh, they could have some really good benefits coming out of this season by trading somebody like Travis Konecny going into this offseason with free agency and the draft, having a lot more opportunity and flexibility
This is the
in what
realistic
they do.
part. Right. Here's the other part that you have to talk about. Are the Flyers better than the Sabres? No. No,
No.
they're not. And actually, if the Sabres get a goalie, they move further ahead than the Flyers. If they have a set goalie next year, um, that really pushes them even further ahead. The Islanders, you can make the argument they're not as good as what they once were, but they're still going to be a little better than the Flyers next year. A lot? No, but a little. Florida, they're falling back a little bit, but I still think they're going to be better. Ottawa's an interesting one. They're better right now with a game in hand, and they're not having a great season. At some point, it probably is going to click more for their young players. So we'll say they're even with Ottawa just to be fair. And honestly, the Red Wings can move ahead of the Flyers next year. Like they're a team with so many good young
Yep.
players that once they add another one or two of them and they figure out their situation with Larkin and everything, if they get to keep him, they're probably better than the Flyers too. So you have to look at it and say, who are you actually going to beat out? Are the Capitals or Penguins going to fall back? Maybe, but we just named you these other teams, and none of them are really pushovers.
Yeah, that is absolutely the case. Any final prediction on whether or not they trade him?
My final prediction is they're not going to trade him, at least not at this trading deadline. Um, and I think that'll be because of the coach. But again, I do predict that we're going to get like mixed messaging at the end of the year, especially, from Chuck. So again, I think if you're not clearly sure, he's going to end up staying.
Yeah, I think he'll end up staying as well, simply because of, again, Tortorella and Chuck Fletcher's track record suggests that he won't. All right, we are going to get to your mailbag questions coming up next.
Looking for a delicious treat, but don't want all the fat and calories? Then you got to try a Built Bar. I know my goal is to eat a little healthier this year. And if you're like me and you want to eat healthier but don't want to compromise taste, then man, have I got just the thing for you. You got to try Built. With Built, healthy is actually tasty. What makes Built Bars so good? Well, for starters, they're covered in 100% real chocolate and they come in unbelievably delicious flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and coconut almond. And that's even better if they are healthy. 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now you don't need to wait around to get a box. For years, we've been talking about ordering Built Bars at built.com. Now you can get them at your local Walmart and Sam's Club. That's right. Head to your nearest Walmart today, walk to the pharmacy section, and grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs. If you're close to Sam's Club, you can run in and get a 13-bar box with our hit flavors, brownie batter, and churro. You can thank me later.
All right, we've got some good questions this week. Sasky Flyboy wants to know what the potential return could be for JVR at the trade deadline.
A conditional second. A conditional,
Conditional. Wow.
yeah, because if it's this year's draft, then I think it's a conditional second. If it's next year's draft, then it's a second. I think that's the best that you could hope for.
Do you think that if the Flyers retain salary, they can make it a second without the conditional?
In this draft, no. And they're going to have to retain salary anyhow. Like, I think
Yeah,
that's
my
just the way it
my
is.
guess is that it's 2.5 to 3 million of retained salary
Yeah. No, I think you're right.
for JVR.
But I'm counting on that to get a second of some sort. Otherwise,
Yeah.
it may not be that.
Yep. I think honestly that is the most you can get. I think it depends on which team it is in terms
Yes.
of where in the second round it could potentially fall, or if it's one of the teams that is doing very well, but has a high second round pick from a previous deal that they've made or something that was from a different team that they could potentially move higher up. But I would like to see them get as high up in the second round as they can. Not having these second round picks for a while has been brutal for the Flyers. So I do think JVR warrants a second round pick in return. I would hate to see a player return unless it was like a almost definite prospect
Yeah.
that is extremely likely to hit.
I mean, originally I thought maybe he would go to the Devils, but they seem to have their sights on Timo Meyer. So if they do that, they're not going to get JVR. I still think there's a percentage chance he goes back to the Leafs. I do think there's that. So,
Hmm.
you could look out for that. So I think there'll be 3 or 4 teams that'll call on JVR. I mean, he's had a good season, but they still know what he is. Like, at the end of the
Right.
day, you know, where his points are coming from. You know what his play is getting. Yes, he's doing a little better. Last year if you traded him, you wouldn't have gotten a second. So at least Tortorella is going to squeeze some extra value out of this.
Right. Speaking of conditions on picks, John G asked via DM on Twitter to explain the difference between a protected pick and a regular draft pick, and how that comes into play when a trade is negotiated.
Yeah. So the protected part is you negotiate. Well, what are you protecting here? Well, top 10, top 11. This year it's top 11. Nobody wants to give away a pick if you have a chance at Connor Bedard. So that means, okay, so you make the trade if if the let's say you make this trade with the Devils and the Devils fall to the 12th pick, well then they're gonna pick this year. If the Devils are out of it and they're at the 8th pick, then your first round pick, then they're gonna do is take the pick this year and give you next year's first round pick, and that's the way it works.
Right. And I don't ever remember seeing a situation where a pick is protected for multiple years. Usually it's just
No, I don't think I've ever
that.
seen that either.
Yeah, it's just that first year. So you get wherever the pick falls the following year if the
Right.
condition is met for this year. And yeah, it's usually just in the draft lottery situation.
Yes.
So, if a team is going to be part of the lottery or not. So
Yep.
that is what conditions are. Mario via email wants to know at this point in the season, with the Flyers not likely to make the playoffs, wouldn't it make sense to put out a fourth line made up of prospects or guys the Flyers think will make the team next year? If not, is it a matter of ice time? Is it better to get less ice time to get used to the high paced NHL versus spending more time on ice in the slower AHL?
Well, I do think there's some other players they could bring up and make a part of a fourth line and not have it be a fourth line, especially now with Zach McEwen being.
McEwen hurt, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you could change the complexion of it and just, put somebody like, I don't know, Ali Lixell with Nick Delorier and just say, yeah, this fourth line now is just another line. We're not really going to focus on the grind part of it and give them more than 8 minutes a game because you could definitely divvy up the minutes on this team a little bit more. And that's what I would do. But that's not what John Tortorella is going to do.
Right. That's the problem here in that. I also think, and we've talked about this before, that after the trade deadline, this is a more likely scenario that they'll call up a couple of
Yes.
guys for the remainder of the season and just give them that limited ice time, but give them that NHL experience toward the end of the season.
Look,
So
I'll go
I
so
think
far as
that's a possibility.
yes, I'll go so far as to say with the mailbag that hey, in the future, there's going to be less and less or fewer fourth lines than what we used to see in the last decade. So you would just be doing something that I think is going to happen anyhow.
Yep. Agreed. Last question. Is Joel Farabee always going to be a half point per game player?
Well, it's interesting because we can't say it's his neck anymore because I look at Jack Eichel and he's close to a point a game and they've had similar surgeries. So it's not that. So what is it about Joel Farabee that's had him sort of stuck in this spot where he's and it's not a bad spot. I mean, but you do expect a little more. He's going to get fewer goals. I would expect more goals. Believe it or not, I'm going to blame this on Kevin Hayes because Hayes and Farabee used to be a good match. Hayes can no longer play center. Now you have Farabee with Noah Cates. Cates can't really drive play at this point, and he's not a big time playmaker. There's no great playmaker for Joel Farabee. That's the problem. If you put him on a line with Konecny, Konecny gets some assists, but he's still going to mostly shoot first, as you saw with all those shots. So I really do think it's a lack of a playmaking center to put him with. I think that's the problem right now.
Yeah, I think that is a fair point, and it's I think they're expecting Joel Farabee to be somebody he's not right
Correct.
now to some degree. So if he gets the right players to play with, and I would say, if he was on a line with Sean Couturier, it would
Oh,
be a
he'd have
lot
eight,
better.
8, 9 more points.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's the big difference here, and hopefully we can get Sean Couturier back next season, but we'll see, um, you know, as things go with the Flyers. But we are going to return tomorrow. We are going to preview the All-Star game in Florida with Kevin Hayes participating. Already seen some gritty content from down there. I don't think you're going to want to see that one, Russ, if you haven't yet, with
Okay.
the bathing suit picture. But
No, I don't need to see
at
that.
any
I've
rate,
seen that before.
we are going to talk about Kevin Hayes in the All Star game, and we are going to get into Owen Tippett, which was another requested player for our bye week profile. So that should be a lot of fun as well. As a reminder, we always want to hear from you. So if you've got questions you want us to answer, like we did today, you can tweet us at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail, or you can comment over on YouTube. I'm Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
Have a great day, everyone.